Go ahead.
Namaste and greetings. I, Lakshita, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered here for the panel discussion on cities, local governance, and union budget 2024 and 25. This deliberation is a part of IMPRI 5th annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of union budget 2024 and 25, which is a series of panel discussions on crucial key policies and union budget 2024 and 25, involving more than 100 thematic distinguished experts and research team members. This discussion is organized by the Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. As a part of IMPRI Web Policy Talk series, The State of Cities, #City Conversations and Local Governance. Now let me introduce to the esteemed gathering. Our chair for the session is Dr. Rumi Aijaz ji, Senior Fellow and Head, Urban Policy Research Initiative, Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi. We welcome you, sir. And moderator for our session is Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay ji, Visiting Senior Fellow, IMPRI, Associate Professor, Department of Economics and Politics, Visva Bharati University. Today's deliberation comprises of an excellent distinguished professor, IMPRI. Today's deliberation comprises of an excellent distinguished panel of experts who will be sharing their expertise, which includes Professor Chetan Vaidyaji, Visiting Distinguished Professor, IMPRI, Independent Urban Advisor, former Director, School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and National Institute of Urban Affairs, NIUA, New Delhi. Independent Director, Gibbs City, Gandhinagar. Professor Vishwanath Alokji, Professor of Public Finance, Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi. Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee ji, Professor, Center for Urban Economic Studies, Department of Economics, University of Calcutta, Visiting Professor, IMPRI. Professor Tathagata Chatterjee ji, Professor of Urban Management and Governance, St. Xavier University, Bhubaneswar. Mr. Sameer Unhale ji, Visiting Senior Fellow, IMPRI, Urban Expert. Dr. Matthew Edicola ji, Legal and Policy Consultant, Visiting Faculty, National Law School of India University, Bangalore. Mr. Tikendra Singh Pawar ji, former Deputy Mayor, Shimla, Senior Fellow, IMPRI. We are extremely grateful to have such a distinguished panel of experts joining us today. Proceeding further, I welcome all the participants to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and efforts into understanding the nuances of cities and local governance within the union budget, while helping us to bring together the practitioners and participants through this course for impactful discussion. Now, without any further ado, let's start the program. It is my honor and privilege to invite Dr. Rumi Aijaz ji to start the program with the chair's opening remarks and proceed with the panel discussion. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Lakshita. And good evening, distinguished speakers and participants in this program. I welcome you along with IMPRI to this program. And I'm looking forward to learning from you about your observations on this year's budget for the year 24-25. I would like to begin my remarks on a positive note because from the data that have been provided by the Government of India on the budgetary allocations for various ministries, I learned that the urban development sector or Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, that's responsible for urban development in the country, is their allocations have increased since last year. And therefore, it's a good indication that the kind of challenges that India is confronted with or grappling with will be addressed, hopefully. I wish to share a few points that I observed as I was going through the finance minister's speech and the data on allocation for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. The first thing I noticed is about the focus areas. In the interim budget, as you know, there were four targeted groups, four focus groups of the government of India: poor, women, farmers, and the youth population of India. In addition to this, in this year's final budget, there is mention of employment, skilling, MSMEs, and middle class. So these groups and these sectors would hopefully benefit from the allocations being made for this year. Specifically for the participants who may not be from the urban community who are participating in this program, I would like to inform them that within the section on urban development in the budget or the finance minister's speech, there is a reference to several key areas requiring attention or areas to which attention would be given in this year. This includes development of cities as growth hubs. And within this, there is a reference to economic and transit planning for such cities which would act as centers of growth. And there is also mention of development of peri-urban areas using town planning schemes. So this is one thing that is mentioned. Secondly, there is a reference to redevelopment of cities in innovative, creative ways, or brownfield development, as we generally discuss insofar existing development is concerned, using market-based mechanisms and regulations. The third thing is about transit-oriented development. And according to the speech or the government of India, 14 cities would be selected with a population of over 30 lakhs. And as work would be undertaken, there's also a mention of having a proper planning and implementation and financing strategy for transit-oriented development. Generally, in master plans, financing strategy has been lacking. So this would be important. The next point is about housing, provision of housing, especially to the poor and middle class communities, and that would be up to about 1 crore houses. And there's also reference to rental housing market. Although attempts have been made in the past, insofar catering to the requirements of migrants is concerned in terms of provision of rental houses, but further work is expected to be done. Then a very important sector, water supply and sanitation. 100 cities would be selected, or they might already have been selected, where water supply and sanitations, sewer and solid waste management projects would be implemented. And there is also a reference of use of treated water for non-potable purposes, which is still lacking in the country insofar as the urban areas are concerned. Then there is a reference to development of street markets. About 100 weekly hearts would be developed for the informal sector workers or street vendors at various 100 places, or a total of 100 weekly hearts would be developed. Then there is reference to reduction of stamp duty rates. I think if I've correctly understood, some discretionary approach has been adopted in the past, and the government needs to control this issue of reducing stamp duties for the welfare of the communities. And also their aim is to ensure that women benefit from this provision. Then there are references to, in addition to the section on urban development, in other sections of the speech, there are references to aspects that have direct linkages with urban areas or development of urban areas, such as rooftop solar panels, power plants, flood control measures or structures, tourism development, facilities for tourists, land record digitalization. There are eminent speakers in today's program who understand very well about the property tax related issues in the country and the underestimation of properties and the loss of finance from this important source of income. So a land record digitalization would be helpful in various ways. It would help in improving the income of urban local bodies or municipalities. Then there is this topic of research and development. It's a very important topic, and it has found, I think, in comparison to previous year's budget, there is more emphasis this time on research and development. This is such an important topic. I think most of the advanced economies or developed countries in the world give a lot of importance to undertaking or conducting research activities, supporting research activities, because that's an important aspect responsible for bringing about a transformation insofar as development of settlements is concerned. So research and development has been given priority. Then there is reference to energy transition. This is a challenging area. Very recently, I've been looking at this topic about the difficulties involved in transitioning from fossil fuels to non-fossil fuel societies and adoption of green measures in the transport sector, in construction, and in other various industrial sectors, etc. And there is also mention of finance for climate adaptation and mitigation. As the climate change related hazards are being experienced with increased frequency, this is an important provision which might attend to the disasters that are being witnessed in various forms. So it's the budget on paper is a very encouraging, very positive looking document, at least on paper. And this is one part of my remark. The second and final remark is on the allocations itself for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. As I said in my first sentence, an increase of 19% has been observed from the previous year. If the allocation previously in 22 or 23, 24, 2023-24 were about 70,000 crores. This year it's about 82,577 crores, which is a 19% increase. And the important expenditure heads like last year are metro rail or MRTS projects, Prime Minister Awas Yojana, Livelihood Mission, Amrut Scheme, Smart City Mission, Swachh Bharat Mission, Urban Component. And some new heads are also observed. New heads have been added, although one of these was added in the interim budget on electric buses, government is giving a lot of importance to electrification in the public transport sector. And in addition to this, new ones are CITIIS, city investment to integrate, innovate, and sustain, if I have got it correctly. CITIIS, and National Urban Digital Mission. So these are some of the recent initiatives, not new because work was already underway in various government institutions insofar as CITIIS and NUDM and e-buses is concerned. We have noted electric buses have been plying in certain cities of India, including in Delhi, about 800 or 1,000. And the idea is to have more and more and completely switch over to electric mobility insofar as public transport buses is concerned. So maximum allocations are for Prime Minister Awas Yojana, urban or housing program, and for metro, rail and MRTS projects, followed by Amrut, Swachh Bharat Mission, urban and smart cities mission, and minimum for CITIIS and livelihood missions. The percentage change or growth rates maximum are observed for Swachh Bharat Mission urban, 96% hike in the allocation since previous year. And Amrut, 50% hike. Prime Minister Awas Yojana urban, 37% hike over the previous year. And electric buses have increased, allocations have increased from 20 crores last year to 1,300 crores for the coming year or this year. And the lowest allocations in terms of percent change are observed for Smart Cities Mission. I think it's going to be closed down. And the livelihood mission has received low allocations, and MRTS also 8%. Although initially the finance minister did say that employment and skilling are top priorities. So these are very positive signs, but there could be a dark side to this budget. There could be weaknesses, there could be deficiencies within this budget. Very recently, I noticed in the news channels about some interviews with workers in cities like Mumbai and elsewhere who are not happy with the job prospects from the places at the places of their residence. They say they are not interested. They have little inclination towards relocating to cities such as Mumbai because of the poor quality or inferior quality of life, but they have no option. So, and migration is happening on a big scale. So, although the government of India recognizes these trends and is well familiar with the grievances of this community, but this problem exists. And the second thing, I'm hearing from the news about some states unhappy with the allocations. They are not receiving grants and funds on time. So this needs to be discussed, deliberated upon as to what further could be done insofar as proper utilization of funds is concerned, so that the targeted groups or the needy groups benefit from this year's budget. Please correct me if I've gone wrong in any of the statements that I've made, but it's over to you to share your thoughts and ideas as a contribution to this year's budget speeches and statements and ideas of the Government of India. And if IMPRI permits, I would like to invite very well-known Professor Chattopadhyay, who has considerable experience and knowledge and has been working in various capacities for a very long time to kindly give his comments on the theme of today's program. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rumi, for that background. You have covered very comprehensively the budget. I'll have to go deep to bring out additional points. I also thank IMPRI for this opportunity of meeting, making this presentation, and also meeting many of my other colleagues from different organizations. Thank you for that kind introduction, Lakshita. I would first like to thank the Finance Minister because in this budget, she identified urban as one of her priorities, urban development as one of her 9 priorities. I think that is a very important thing. And we were competing with things like productivity, employment and skills, inclusive human resources, manufacturing, energy transition, infrastructure and innovation. Within that priority, urban development has identified as an important priority sector. As mentioned by Dr. Rumi, Prime Minister's Awas Yojana 2.0 is providing 1 crore housing for the urban poor and middle class families. And they're also going to be enabling policies for efficient rental markets, and possibly there'll be a new rent act, guidance for a new rent act in different cities, which will promote rental housing, and there'll be special efforts to promote rental housing for industrial workers and affordable rental housing. I still feel that one vertical of this whole housing initiative is community-based slum improvement program, UBS, as it was known long ago, which took community and then provided incremental housing, common services, and even common tenure for a group of people. Unfortunately, we have missed down that, and we have become very individualistic in this affordable housing effort. It is very good to see that under water management, there is promotion of water supply, solid waste management, sewage treatment for 100 cities. But what is important to mention and bring out is that the focus is on bankable projects or PPP. Unfortunately, PPP has not been very successful in urban sector till now, and we are still trying to understand what that framework will be for PPP in urban sector. And for this, what is important is that we support municipal bonds, which is not being clearly mentioned. Also focus on revenue generation, specifically property tax. I think Amrut and Swachh Bharat Mission are going to be limited to 100 cities, if I have understood it correctly, but it could be clarified later. There is a mention of helping 14 large cities with 30 lakh population to develop TOD, transit-oriented development. And there will be a cell in MHU to promote or to support TOD in these cities. I think it's a very good move, but I think it needs to be linked up with viable metro system. I think except 2 or 3 or 4 cities, our metro systems are not viable, and it will be long time before they really have the number of passengers which are required. I wish we had equally given importance to BRTS, BERT's rapid transport system. At this stage, I would also like to mention that the high-speed rail between Ahmedabad and Mumbai is focusing with Japan technical support. It is focusing on development of areas around the railway station. It's a very, very positive way, pedestrian plaza, high density, something like transit oriented, but much beyond human friendly kind of thing. And I think that we need to look at. It's also nice to see, as mentioned by Dr. Rumi, to reduce stamp duties, particularly for women. But on the other hand, I see that rental income from properties has been now not to be treated as business income. And also there is a conflict with reduction of capital gains. And this needs to be looked at it together. Support to street market is a very positive step. but this should be linked with vendor policies. The re-densification, I think that is also very good to see that there will be a focus on brownfield redevelopment, because we need to develop our existing cities in Ahmedabad and even in Bombay. I believe in South Bombay, there are more projects of re-densification rather than new project, and which is very helpful for the cities. I sincerely feel that budget has not provided enough support for inclusive development. I think funding for National Urban Livelihood Program has come down, and very little support for community-based activities. And this is a negative point, and I think we need to focus it. Overall, maybe there are some things the budget has looked at inclusive development, but it has not looked at for urban areas. There is no mention of supporting urban local bodies. I didn't see any specific support for local bodies, the third level of our government, and it is only support which I see is from the Central Finance Commission. The local bodies is the strength of our urban governance. It needs to be improved in terms of database, digitization, capacity building, and also perhaps a relook at 74th constitutional amendment. And here I would like to link it with the work which Keshav Vermaji's committee is doing on urban town planning. And I think they are putting a lot of focus on urban local bodies. I have two messages which partly was mentioned by Dr. Rumi. We have to go beyond the urban sector section of the budget. Some examples are there is support in terms of legal and tax incentives for Gujarat International Finance Tech, that is GIFT City in Gujarat. It is not enough to provide good infrastructure. It's equally important to give tax incentives and legal support, which has happened, and its continuous support is being provided by Gujarat government near Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar, and I think it is increasing international investment and employment of a very high, different kind, particularly in financial technology side in this city. Also, there is establishment of industrial node along Amritsar-Kolkata industrial corridor, which will increase demand for real estate both in commerce and in residential areas. Amravati again has got whatever the political implications are, but support to Amravati will also generate a lot of additional investment, and then improved land record will help the local bodies to increase their revenue and investment. I should also mention that climate finance taxonomy for adoption is to reduce greenhouse gases and supporting our energy transition, which needs to be linked. We have to take benefit of this other parts of urban development. My second message is it's time for urban sector to shift from projects to program. I think since JNURM, we are focusing on projects. Projects is not enough. We need to meet to a program, an overall program, which would mean national urban development policy, which would mean state urban development policy linking with the national policy. And at the city level, we should go for city development strategy or city development program, which is like corporate plan, which in addition, we should have a financial operating plan or capital investment plan, which looks at PPP, bonds, government support, enhanced own revenue, and all this together will give us a strategy for urban development, which is sustainable over long period of time. Thank you so much, IMPRI and Dr. Rumi. And if there are any questions, I can come back at the end of the presentations.
Thank you, sir, for your points. I think you have really enriched the discussion and added a lot of value to the to this topic. And the points that you've shared are extremely important. The missing areas or the areas to which attention has not been paid, you have rightly highlighted. And I completely agree with you on your final concluding point on the need to have a proper comprehensive program for the entire country instead of a project approach that has been observed in some of the recent initiatives. So thanks a lot. And we will get back to you during the discussion round. May I now invite Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee to give her views on the topic. We would request you to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, I was opening the video. Anyway, thank you, Rumi, and thank you, IMPRI, for inviting me in this talk. Now, I would like to start with where Professor Chattopadhyay has ended. Even I think that one of the problem in today's budget and everything is that when we had this planning commission and the 5-year plan, then we could understand from the budget that how the country is moving, whether this budget is supporting the 5-year plan programs and others. Now, what has happened after 2014 and the dismantling of planning commission and others, we get a budget every year. With Nirmala Sitharaman becoming the finance minister, we are getting priorities. We are getting priorities every year. Now, this year, as you have all seen, that there are 9 priorities and one of them is urban development. This is surely a very important point. That is from our childhood, we used to hear that India is a country, India is a rural country, India is a country of agriculture and others. And whatever be our master plan approach or anything that started from late 50s, that did not give enough priority or enough importance to the urban sector. So this is really a change. And now coming to the budget itself, I think the budget has been mentioned budget has mentioned urban thing in many ways. The first thing was this PM Awas Yojana with 3 crore additional housing for urban component for the poor and the middle class. Then the digital public infrastructure for urban governance. Then within the priority itself, there is talk of cities as growth hubs, with economic and transit planning. Then there is transit-oriented development for 14 large cities, then the etc. Now, these are very, very important. They're very, very important, but there is apprehension about something. As you see, there is one of the priorities which calls of creative redevelopment of cities, brownfield redevelopment. And this is where I have some fear, looking at the things that happened in Varanasi and others. Now, every town and city has its own character, which is historically derived. Now, of course, there are starting from what has started with our improvement trust, there are widening of roads, etc. I'm not denying the need for all those things, but if you speak of this creative redevelopment and then that demolishes the character of the city actually known for, and then there is sense of apprehension for that. And I'm really afraid about that what is meant by this creative redevelopment of cities, brownfield redevelopment, and so. Then again, as we do not have any comprehensive framework, we are unable to understand. One of the problem is that the census 2021 has not happened, and we are not sure when it will happen. So we are not at all sure that how the urban thing will shape if the actual counting has done. As we are surprised in the 2011 census with the coming up of so many census towns, we are not sure whether that process will continue. As Professor Om Prakash Mathur has said, that this reclassification has become the new urban rather than natural growth or anything. So whether this reclassification is going to happen, then that will take us to the need for different type of settlement planning, because rural areas are becoming census towns, and what will we do with that? So what will we do? But if the process is changed, as there was fear during the COVID with the return migration and others, people are going back to villages. If that process is not continuing, then surely our strategy had to change. With the absence of this census 2021, we just don't know what is happening to the urban transformation process. So what will happen to budget and one thing? Again, the problem is that our whole concentration is about the large cities and towns, whether it is for transit-oriented development or peri-urban development, economic and transit planning, etc. We just forgot the lots and lots of small and medium towns we have, and they are languishing. This is a thing coming that cumulative development of big cities, large cities, etc. They are attracting more and more people, and the lower order cities, lower order urban areas, they are just languishing. They are not getting enough urban amenities and others, and that is also pushing people to larger cities. So larger cities are becoming, larger cities are almost saturated, and the vertical growth, one of the vertical growth is about what we have seen in the summer, that that we are having heat islands and etc. So what will happen? So I also think with Professor Boydar that we need some sort of going out of this mission mode or project mode. We should have a proper urban policy, proper settlement policy. Now we are that is difficult to get from this 1 year budget type of thing. In budget, we just get allocations. We just calculate whether the allocations have increased or decreased, and in that way we calculate the priority. Of course, there are very good things like land-related reforms, like land administration, planning and management. Urban planning is being revamped, and in the allocations we will see that some institutions are to be curated as places for urban teaching, urban planning and other things. That is definitely very important. Then GIS mapping, IT-based system for property records, etc. If that can be done, one should mean that there is huge cost about that. Whether our, again, smaller cities and towns are being able to do that without proper help. If that is said, that is to be done by a self-financing mode, that is difficult to do. What will be the amount of central assistance, or whether this will be a shared thing between the center and the states, we are not very sure from this budget speech. If that can be done, that will surely improve the financial position of urban local bodies. They can plan their property tax accordingly. They can collect their property tax accordingly. But I am not sure whether this whole digitization can be done with the financial strength of our small urban bodies. And then, of course, water supply and sanitation, again, as I have said, that is for 100 large cities only. And that takes me to the point that what will happen to smaller cities and towns? Will they go on languishing? Then street markets and vendors, again, very important. Very important. We hardly see any proper implementation of the 2014 Act. Then about stamp duty, again, I have a point that if you discriminate with, there is a discriminatory rate with the female, then what will happen, that the properties will be bought in the name of the female member of the family, but as we have seen in case of different types of loans and bank accounts, etc., this is done in the name of the female member of the family, but that doesn't mean female empowerment or the female having actual control over the property itself. That is one of my fear doing with after working with so-called female entrepreneurs and others. That they are female entrepreneurs in name, but everything is controlled by the male members of the family, be it husband, be it son, be it father. So that is my apprehension. But otherwise, as I have started by saying that this is very important that urban development has become a priority. But the question remains that what type of urban development? Is it meant for the large cities and big cities only? Or we are going to have a proper urban policy and a settlement pattern taking into account the census towns, smaller towns, smaller so-called statutory towns and others? Or our attention will just be concentrated to large cities and towns, as this budget has shown, that 14 cities for transit-oriented development, 100 cities for water supply and sanitation. What will happen to other 7,000 plus urban areas? Thank you for now. Again, I will come back in the question answer session.
Thanks a lot, Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee. I think it was a very good review of the budget document, and the points that you shared on city character being demolished or not maintaining, preserving the real character, original character of cities, lack of census data, and the less importance given to small and medium towns are very important observations, and I completely agree with your comments, and I would like to thank you for sharing your ideas. And we'll come back to you during the discussion round. I would like to invite Professor V.N. Alok, who is with the Indian Institute of Public Administration, working for long, especially on the topic of municipal finance, to present or to share his observations and ideas of what he thinks about this current budget document. Over to you, Professor Alok.
Thank you, Rumi. And thanks to IMPRI for the invite. In fact, I am delighted to be part of this panel discussions on cities, local governance, and union budget 2024-25. The budget proposals are actually presented on the 23rd of July in the Lok Sabha, and the House is there in motion. This is the first full budget in the 18th Lok Sabha, presented in this late July. The next union budget is due on the 1st of February 2025. While we could see some proposals which have been made in this budget, we may expect bigger proposals in the next budget, because this particular budget is for few months, not for full year. However, we can make some analysis based on the current proposals. So there was an issue before this elections on employment. Okay? And there is this issue remains even after the elections being held. So what one can see, the focus of this budget is largely on unemployment. I must say that the proposals that have been made in this budget in a very complex economic environment, the International Monetary Fund's World Economic Outlook, it reports the forecast global growth to slow from 8.2% in 2023 to 7% in 2024 and 6.5% in 2025. This upside inflation has forced the central banks around the world to tighten their economy. Through over-tightening may push the global economy into some kind of a recession. And its spillover effect is evident actually in India. So the RBI has raised its key repo rate from 4% in October 2020 to 6.5% in February 2023 and remain unchanged till the last Monetary Policy Committee. which met in June 2024. So that was about the broad part of it. Now, coming to employment, the ILO data suggests that India's employment to population, that is, the population is over the age of 15 years. So the employment to population ratio has dropped from 55% 2005 to 52.7% 2023. So employment is actually going down. So there is a lower than the other developing countries. Okay, particularly if you see Bangladesh, that is 54%, China is 65%, and Vietnam is 73%. So we are nowhere near Vietnam, which is which can be compared. And the periodic labor force survey that has been conducted by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, it shows that the urban employment ratio has declined from 9.8% in July 2021 to 6.8% during January-March 2023 to 6.7% during January-March 2024. So far as urban employment is concerned, again, it's going down. So the labor participation rate has actually increased from 50% to it has increased to some extent. So there are other statistics from the Employment Provident Fund organizations, which indicates the consistency so far as the payroll addition is concerned. So a couple of things that we can see, there are all kinds of statistics, but the government has kept the nominal growth rate unchanged from at 10.5%. That is the nominal rate. I'm not about the real growth rate. And what all the speakers have said, the urban development has been given the 5th priority in the all 9 priority areas that have been identified in the Union Budget 2024-25. While we can see, as the Professor Malaya has said, the other priorities like employment and skilling, manufacturing and services, energy security, infrastructure, innovation, technology, they are also significant drivers so far as the economic growth in urban sector is concerned. Now, since this seminar is also on local governance, we must say that we have about 5,000 odd local governments in this country, and out of that, about 250 odd are municipal corporations, about 2,000 municipalities, and 2,500 odd Nagar Panchayats. And these bodies, they do not get money directly from the union budget. Okay, it gets money from the Finance Commission's transfers, and Finance Commission's transfers, it keeps on increasing as per the 15 Finance Commission's recommendations. So these urban local governments is actually draws power from the state legislations, and whatever money that has been transferred to the states, a part of this transfer to the municipalities, both all these municipalities, the municipal corporations, municipal councils, and Nagar Panchayats. Okay, and they have in turn do some work on sanitation, drinking water, street lights, and rural roads. These municipalities, they do have the authority to collect taxes and non-taxes. We all know that. It's only some of the municipal corporations, those who are in a position to collect about 50% of the total resource requirement. The rest of them typically depends upon the transfers. So the kind of transfer that has taken place in this year budget, it has increased from 25,000 crores, which was budgeted in 2024-25. It's 25,653 crores to be very precise, which has been budgeted from 19,222 crores, which is the figures of 2023 revised estimates. So it's quite a jump. It's about 25% jump, which is quite substantial, I must say. Despite that, there were some conditionalities which was imposed by the 15 Finance Commissions, that if you do not have a state finance commission in place, that is by the 31st March 2024, then you will not be getting some conditional grants from the union government. And as Rumi has said, the budget allocations for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, this has increased from 69,000 crores to 82.5 thousand crores. If we compare the figures of the 2023-24 revised estimates to the budgeted figures of this year, so it's actually 16% increase. I think your figures, the 19%, is based on the budgeted figures of 2023-24. So, so the capital expenditure is hiked to 28,628 crores from 26,533 crores if we take the figures of 2023-24 revised estimates. This is again an increase of 7.3% over the revised estimates of 2023-24. And a significant increase of 9.6% proposed on center sector schemes. Okay, so a couple of things that's already been mentioned. I don't want to repeat that. And of course, there was an increase in Swachh Bharat urban component, and but there was a sharp decline so far as the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, that is the urban livelihood missions. So that is something one has to look at it. In the paucity of time, just wanted to mention, though this government has been allocating lots of money for capital purposes then to the states, but states, as the data suggests, many of the states are not actually spending that money. And it has something to say so far the urban sectors are concerned, so far the city economy is concerned. The government focus is on physical infrastructure, largely on physical infrastructure, not so much on social infrastructure. And the physical infrastructure can improve if both the union, state, and local government, they work together. That's a point I just wanted to mention it here. And with the paucity of time, I don't want to mention the other things. Maybe in the second round, I can get into this. Thank you very much, Rumi.
Thank you, Professor Alok, for your views. I think the most, your final statement on various governments at the center, state, and local level working together is the most, has been the most challenging thing in India. There are numerous instances of problems being experienced on various fronts, and it's something that needs to be sorted out in the country. And I would also like to thank you for extending the discussion on employment and fiscal transfers, the various indicators that you mentioned. It did help us and me in understanding what goes behind insofar as taking decisions on budgets is concerned. So your points are well taken. Thank you. We will be getting back to you. And I would like to move further in this program by inviting Mr. Tikender Singh Panwar, who in my view, he has immense experience, understanding of the urban sector. He has worked in various capacities, and he has been with the elected government in Shimla at a certain point in time. And he would be a very good person, best person to to explain to us and the gathering, the participants, as to what all goes on insofar as these receipt of budgets at local levels is concerned. So over to you, Mr. Panwar.
Am I the last speaker, or is there someone else to speak after me as well? I can't hear you, Rumi.
Yeah, so I said there are 4 more speakers after you.
Achha. Because you will have to pardon me and let me know what is the time that I have, because I am in this urban commission in Kerala.
Okay.
So, the Kerala has formed an urban commission, and I'm in that process of engaging with the mayors and the elected chairpersons.
Okay, see, so if you wish, you would like to speak for about 8 minutes.
Oh my God, achha, I'll try to finish off in 8 minutes. And then, because then I have to move out. That's my tragedy, because we have those series of meetings going on. I'm in Kerala for another 10 days. Okay, thank you, Rumi, and thank you, IMPRI, Arjun. I could hear 2 voices because somehow I couldn't get the link earlier. Hi, Matthew, I can see you as well there. So, therefore, it took time for me to join the conversation. I think to me, I will not be very specific as Professor Alok was, because he is an expert and doyen on urban finances. I would be very generic as far as my comments are concerned. I think this budget needs to be seen in some, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, perhaps 5 or 6 backgrounds that I have jotted down. And the first background is, and that we get, we can gauge that even from the economic survey, is the pressing unemployment, which the economic survey has also registered. And we expected that some redressal of this unemployment will take place. So that's the first element I think we should have looked at, even from the urban governance perspective. I'll come to that. The second one is the growing inflation, especially food inflation, which is soaring very high. I don't have to explain that. And the third, Rumi, which you and I know, the kind of urbanization that we have unleashed in India is what I call a copy-paste model of the West, where we thought that, the millions of people who would become surplus from the countryside, we would be able to absorb them in the cities. And unleashing the power of manufacturing-led urbanization would actually pave our way for some kind of sustainable urban development. But we know this didn't happen. This happened perhaps for a few decades, 1 or 2 decades after independence. And then it was primarily the tertiary sector-driven urbanization that we are witnessing. Why I'm pointing this out, Rumi, right now is, unfortunately, and of course, the Western urbanization also sustained because of this massive loot that they could garner from the colonies like us. And Utsa Patnaik has pointed out there's some $45 trillion that actually we contributed in the sustainability of Britain's urbanization or Britain development. So the point is that this huge surplus that is getting into the cities, what I call rural distress, this migration, that is massive migration that is coming to the cities. So there, I mean, of course, we don't expect the budget to address that, but at least some element of engagement with this question of what do we talk? Are we just talking about rental housing? I mean, how are we just looking at it? And which is like employed, almost 90% of the employment is coming in the informal sector. This actually is one of the most pressing problems as far as urbanization is concerned. And World Bank has estimated that almost 50% of the urban population is now living in slums. So this rural distress was a major issue. And rural distress, by the way, doesn't just mean, addressing urban issues, but also addressing rural issues per se, the whole question of farming sector, etc. The fourth issue, I think, to me, is the crisis, the petty production sector. We have these reports, Professor Alok would be able to correct me, but the ILO has pointed out how in the recent past, actually the manufacturing, and this is also that has appeared in the during the budget debates in the Hindu recently, that how the manufacturing sector has slipped. pretty badly in the recent times, and there where the employment has also gone. So, so that's the fourth area. And the fifth area, which I think the budget should have addressed, is the whole question of income and wealth inequality. That is like disproportionately engulfing our city habitats, and I don't have to explain the Oxfam report, but we all know here that this is one of the precipitating problems. So how do we address these 5 issues? I think should have been one of the areas. And to do that, the generic sense would be that there should have been an increase in the overall state spending, at least to stimulate some aggregate demand, because demand is one of the major issues in this area. But what we are witnessing now, if I come to that, what we're witnessing is that, take for example all these important social development sectors, and that pertains to cities also, by the way: education, healthcare, employment. I mean, I'll talk about employment, because we've been hearing a lot about this incentive scheme. All of them, unfortunately, have seen a very negligible rise. But if we see that in relation to the percentage of GDP, there is actually a fall. So actually, you don't find, the whole direction to address these issues. And if you also see the whole question of how this mobilization of the funds are taking place. Are there any additional resources being mobilized? So you find it's growth in the non-tax revenue. Come on, where is this money coming from? The capital expenditure that we're talking about sometime back. So we have seen that the capital expenditure increase would be by almost 1 lakh crore. But, there's no jump in tax revenue. So which means, where is this money coming from? This money is coming from, and this is what has happened in the last few years, 2022-23 to 2024-25, and another projection is there. Now, look at this startling figure. This revenue was somewhere around what I'm calling the non-tax revenue from 30,000 crore, almost 2.4 lakh crore. From 30,000 crore to 2.4 lakh crore. And this comes from the RBI, from the dividends, from the bonds. So you can understand, the broad direction that we are actually entering into. So likewise, if you see the whole question of the whole question of urbanization that we're talking about and urban governance, I think there's certain precipitating areas, and let me come to some very practical experiences, because I've been traveling right from Kashmir to Guwahati in the Himalayan Forum, and now part of the Kerala Urban Commission in Kerala. I'll be here for 2 weeks. Rumi, mark my words, there is a disastrous precipitating of solid waste management and liquid waste management in the country. Every city, I'm telling you, Srinagar, it's 90% waste, liquid waste that goes into Jhelum. Guwahati, it's almost 95% waste that goes into, talk any town in the country and you'll find this is the most precipitating problem. Now, what is the way that should have been articulated in the union budget? Just to talk about one and not to talk about habitat, I've already spoken about migration, the whole question of housing that should have been addressed. One of the ways should have been to expand the capacities of the cities. And when I say to expand the capacities of the cities, instead of, and if you see the expenditure that takes place under Swachh Bharat Mission or under various centrally sponsored schemes where the money is kept, it is more to do with the technology. So what is being pushed from the center is more capital intensive technologies, and where the cities are asked to borrow these technologies, create a framework. Take, for example, sweeping in the cities. So instead of your manual sweeping, pushes for very high tech robotic machines which cost not less than 4 crores or 5 crores. Likewise, under solid waste management, the pushes for from waste to energy plants. Likewise, in liquid waste, the pushes for, so that is where even the capital expenditure, apart from the national highways that I'm talking about. So this whole question of city governance is being completely crippled from the center. Instead of giving that capacity, now I'll give you one very small example to me. Take, for example, Shillong. I went to Shillong, and Shillong is 100% value. 100% liquid waste goes into the water ecosystem. But I'm not talking about liquid waste. I need to share some details about the PMO. I mean, the most funny part that you find in Shillong is that because the PMAY means you have to construct a pakka house. Now, someone sitting in Delhi doesn't realize that a pakka house in the Himalayan terrain cannot be a RCC house, for example, Ladakh or, for example, in Shillong. So instead of their own architectural design, what they could have gone for, what they call the Assam design, which is primarily mud, than bricks and all, which is far better, resilient, climate resilient design. They have pushed for designs which are RCC. So actually, when you talk about urban governance in the budget, this whole imaginative question of localizing the question, the issues. Take for example, even solid waste management or even liquid waste management, actually should have been one of the ways and one of the forms in which this question should have been addressed. But Rumi, overall, if you see, I mean, with those, I mean, if I have another 2 minutes to conclude, if you see, what is it that we have been asking? You have the World Bank report, which is saying $840 billion is what is required to provide bare minimum in urban India. And we are still working with the 2011 census. We do not even know what the reality is, what real figures are. This is what we're trying to correct in Kerala, by the way, even to define what is urban and what is rural. Okay, because we are not very clear. We have the urban definition under statutory towns, then we have census towns. But here in one of the vertical pillars, we're trying to address that as an issue. But having said that, I think what is important is that in this process of infrastructure development, this is what we have. It's $1 trillion. So which means you require some 80 lakh crore rupees. So, and what is the money that is being transferred? It is just piecemeal. So we are just lifting one side of the seesaw and then pushing another side of the seesaw. Actually, if you see on the ground, there's nothing that is happening. And the push for mere optics, for now the smart cities are gone. Rumi, you and I know we were like very critical when this was unleashed. And we said these won't become lighthouses, these will become diffused bulbs. Now no one is even lighting those bulbs anymore. We're not even talking about smart cities. So likewise, Amrut, so the devolution is very less, and that's what Professor Alok was also pointing out. That's what we have been arguing with the 16th Finance Commission, that for heaven's sake, we are one of the lowest in South Asia. It's 0.5% of GDP. At least make it double. Brazil is 5.1% of the GDP, the total, the intergovernmental transfers. Likewise, Philippines is also almost 3.1% of their GDP. So unless we think beyond the box and we decide, okay, this is the way devolution is one of the forms, one of the ways in mitigating the whole question of urban governance. And on top of that, there's another precipitating problem which we were not. It's not that we were not concerned, but that was not very precipitating in the 70s and 80s. Is this whole question of climate change and its impact in the cities? You keep on contributing to the infrastructure, whatever infrastructure you build, and then it gets washed away. I mean, Surat, for that matter, various other towns. You've seen what is happening. So, we do not even talk about what should have been the question of environmental services, environmental engineers in the cities. And if you see the human resource element in the cities, it's almost 20% to what is the desired capacity. So, and if you see the tight grants under the 15th Finance Commission, they do not allow you that space or that capacity, even to professionalize your cadres. So this professionalization of your cadres through the devolution of funds or through financial elements, which only speaks about hard infrastructure, is giving way for many parastatals to enter these domains. And these parastatals are then hijacking. Take, for example, in a state where you have some 7,000 crore rupees lying for solid waste management, but this will not go to the cities. These will be plans which will be made at the state center. And then at the state center, this money will be utilized, but not actually bringing up the bottom-up approach. And the bottom-up approach could have been easily linking it to localizing the whole question. So to me, I think this is nothing new. This is just a continuation of the previous budgets, which is like what I've been saying it since and it's like so the India's elite and business is like really swimming in excess profits, and the cities are actually contributing to these excess profits through what I call the accumulation of capital. Unfortunately, the democratization of capital, which should have happened, which we found some element in the economic survey in the budget, did not take place. And all the employment we are talking about, to me, is in formal sector. How many people are employed in formal? Now the ILO says that more than 90% of people are employed in formal. And there too, I mean, so the trick is I employ 1 year and then I throw in the next year because again I'll grab this incentive. So this incentivization is, and we've seen there was a similar incentive in 2020 budget. We do not even talk about that. So to me, I think it is a damn squib. It is not going to contribute either to the demand or to addressing the employment scenario in this. I think with that, I'll like.
Thank you, Mr. Panwar, for your comments. I think this is it's a fresh perspective. I see it as a fresh perspective. I don't think the other distinguished speakers would be sharing views that are in line what you say.
And also there. Adab sahab. Sorry, Rumi.
And especially your mention about the issues unaddressed, the deficiencies in approach, the magnitude of the challenge, the various examples that you gave from Shillong and other Indian cities are well taken. And if you are with us for the entire program, the participants would benefit from anything they would like to ask you. I would like to thank you once again on behalf of IMPRI, and would now invite, if other distinguished speakers would allow me, I would like to invite Professor Tathagata Chatterjee to share his ideas on this year's budget.
Thank you, Dr. Rumi, and thank you, IMPRI, for inviting me. It is really nice to see that the urban issues are increasingly getting prioritized in successive budgets. Coming to this year's budget in particular, I find it nice that economic roles of the cities are getting recognized. Cities are indeed engines of the economic growth. And I mean, that recognition had long been overdue. And so there has been a positive move in that regard, which is very encouraging. I find another interesting idea is that, I mean, about the creative urban renewal. Old city areas in most Indian cities have become excessively congested and are in a very bad state in terms of environmental qualities. So taking up the renewal of the old city areas or brownfield regeneration is definitely the need of the hour. And interestingly, in some of the smart city projects, there was a move in this direction to have an area-based approach in some of the small parts of the old city areas, mainly from the angle of tourism and heritage and cultural preservation. But brownfield regeneration is also a very, very tricky issue. And unless it is done in a properly planned manner, this can become a tool for the real estate. And unprecedented, I mean, it can lead to a lot of destruction of the old areas, and I mean, can lead to gentrification and displacement of large numbers of people. and also loss of cultural heritage. So brownfield regeneration needs to be definitely it is needed, but should not be done in a haphazard or in one size fits all kind of manner. It needs to be done in a planned manner. Second interesting idea is that, I mean, that idea about 100 food streets, this can surely have an impact on the local livelihoods, because as all of us know, that informal sector forms the bulk of the city workforce, and I mean focus on the street vendors and informal livelihoods that can get a boost through these food streets. But the sad reality is that in many cities, the um, vending and non-vending zones, which are required to be demarcated under the Street Vendors Act of 2014, or town vending committees are to be formed to take into account the voices of the street vendors. So this has not happened in many cities. So this food street could be a good step in that direction, but I mean it should be done in concurrence with the street vendors, and it should not be just a tokenistic approach towards development of one particular street, but should be seen in the larger context of urban informality in the cities. Also, I see that, I mean, there are some positive elements also there in the city, in this year's budget, particularly the focus on transit area, oriented development and thrust towards metro rail. That is definitely a very positive thing. But again, the question is how the metro rail projects and the transit-oriented developments are going to be prioritized. There is a concern here that these projects should not turn into a supply side issue. That, you know, I mean, the cities would go for metro rail projects or transit-oriented development without proper planning. And Professor Chattopadhyay made this point very interesting at the beginning, that, I mean, most metro rail projects are not really commercially very viable. So if the cities start building metro rails, and without adequate ridership, then it might turn out into a white elephant. So that is a big area of concern, that how these projects are going to be implemented. What is particularly bit disappointing in this year's budget, I feel that there has not been much talk about the environmental aspects of the cities. Most cities in India are now facing unprecedented environmental challenge. This year in particular, almost all the cities faced huge problems due to urban heat island effect. And every year during the monsoon months, whether it is now Mumbai is getting flooded, or in the other year, whether Chennai is getting flooded or Bangalore is getting flooded. So the environmental issues, challenges facing the cities, to me, it's a most important aspect that needs to be addressed. And the budget, of course, it is not possible to address every challenge through the budget and urban development. At the end of the day, it's a state subject. But as the role of the national government in our three-tier governance system, in the urban system, has increasingly become important. So then there is a scope for the national government to set the action agenda through the budget. And there, I think more focus on the urban, the environmental concerns facing the cities and the climate change impact could have been helpful. And of course, I mean, the issue that we need to move away from, as Professor Chattopadhyay mentioned, Professor Maga has also mentioned, that we need to move away from this project-based approach. When this the government is giving metro rails or electric buses, and that, I mean, to move towards a more planning and the city level policy and the city level master plan and the state level urban policy and the empowerment of the cities. So that those are indeed actually the need of the hour. And I mean, the government, because the central government has got the financial power, and by leveraging that financial power, it can actually steer the states to prepare the state level urban policies. I think, I mean, the budget could have set some direction in that way. So with this, I would like to stop now, and we'll wait for the next round of comments.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee. I think this was a very good point-by-point review of the statements presented in this year's budget, and also thankful for your suggestions as to how some of the problems need to be addressed in terms of what kind of approaches can be adopted. I found your talk interesting in the sense that you spoke about the challenges involved in urban renewal and the transit-oriented development. These are very complicated, difficult aspects that India has been struggling with, but many countries have overcome such challenges, and one could also always learn lessons from those regions and find ways to develop customized solutions for our country. Your point about this one on 100 street hearts, especially purely for the informal sector workers, street vendors, this looks to me like a city-focused approach benefiting the street vendors in cities. It's an issue. It's a big issue. Demarcation of vending zones is an issue. Somehow, as all the speakers, including you, have highlighted the continued neglect of small and medium towns in terms of creation of economic potential, tapping economic potential, or creation of employment opportunities should have been given equal priority. And your final point on environment-related concerns, very important aspect. Although, as I mentioned in the introductory remarks about, or at least on paper, they mention that attention will be given towards establishment of flood control structures, and efforts would be made to generate funds for climate adaptation and mitigation. Let us see how far the government is able to successfully take forward these ideas. These are very challenging things, and I think they need to work very systematically if they want to see some progress on these fronts. So on behalf of IMPRI, I thank you for your views, and I would come back, we will come back to you during the discussion round. And I would like to invite a young scholar who's very patiently waiting, Dr. Matthew Edikula. And if I remember correctly, he is from Bengaluru, and he has been looking at the legal aspects of local governments and on various topics related to urbanization and urban governance in India. And it's very good to have you in the program. And I invite you to present your ideas of how this budget is and what has been neglected in this year's budget. Over to you.
Thanks, Rumi, for the introduction, and thanks, IMPRI, for the invitation. I think we are running quite behind the schedule, so I'll keep my comments to 7-8 minutes itself, and so that we have a bit of time for discussion. since we have covered quite a bit of what the, quite a bit of time discussing what the budget contains and also some of the challenges, what I seek to do over the next 7 minutes is try to capture the core message that the budget seeks to, bring out in the context of the urban, right? So firstly, what the budget seems to be showing very clearly, and secondly, key takeaways. I would say 3 key takeaways from the budget from the perspective of the urban. So what is this budget, looking broadly beyond the urban, what is this budget in response to, right? The budget is in some ways a response to the current political climate and the current sort of message that the voters have given to this government, which has got re-elected with a much lower sort of majority, right? So in that context, you can see the focus, at least on paper, the focus on some aspects of unemployment and the message from the voters, especially the young, unemployed sort of youth, regarding issues, that they're facing. So if you look at many parts of the budget, there is a recognition of that, and there's some sort of a response to that clearly emerging. Now, and of course, going sort of from the interim budget to, you can see this idea of 4 castes, which is the poor, women, youth, and farmers. 3 of those castes, all of them are directly relevant in the urban context. So given that overall message that the voters have given and that response that the government is trying to do, trying to respond, given that, how does it fit in the urban context? For example, some of the political necessities regarding the budgetary framework is very clear in terms of the allocations you can see for, say, Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, obviously given the coalition government that we have. What does it mean for in the urban context? It means there's a 15,000 crore allocation for the Amravati. Of course, it will be done not just through government funds, but through other means of funding. This is 15,000 crore funding which is coming to Amravati, for example, right? Which is a which was in some ways till now neglected, at least within the framework of the previous setup. Yes, and how does I think there's some disturbance in the line, so if you can mute the others, it will be easier. So now, how does this translate in the context of the urban, right? How does all of these things translate in the context of urban? We have had over the last, it's almost 1.5 hours, over the last 1.5 hours, we've discussed various aspects and various things that the budget introduced. But what are the key takeaways in terms of in the urban context, the way I see it? I would say there are 3 key takeaways. Let me briefly mention what these 3 are for me. One is urban development as a priority for government is clearly emerging. That point has been made, but I will try to understand that priority from a different perspective. Urban development for whom, right? So one is urban development as a priority, as a key takeaway. The other second key takeaway is a rethink, a possible rethink on showpiece urbanism, what I call showpiece urbanism, along the lines of, say, smart cities, right? Smart cities being a classic case of it. Possible rethink of a form of showpiece urbanism is the other key takeaway. And secondly, new directions towards a planning-centered or a town planning-centered approach to urban development as a new or a consistent feature you see in many projects that many of you have listed, right? So these are the 3 key takeaways in the urban that I would be focusing on. So let me start with the first, right? So these, I just listed the 3 takeaways. Now let's over the next 3-4 minutes, I'll just try to the implications of these and what it means, right? So firstly, as it's been mentioned many times, so I don't want to repeat, urban development is one of the 9 priorities. There's been an increase of about 16% of funding for urban. But the question I would like to ask is urban development, firstly, of what kind? Secondly, urban development for whom? And urban development by who, right? These are questions we need to think about a bit more, right? So what is the kind of urban development that is imagined? I think there is a mix of things. It's not a very clear message. that there's only one kind of urban development that's imagined. You can see a bit more focus coming into some of the more questions around inclusion coming in, for example, right? In the midst, that's clearly there. But in terms of the larger response this budget was to, which is the unemployment crisis, which is the large distress that the youth is facing, does the budget have much for that? Not really. If you look at how many states have responded to the unemployment issue, you'll be aware that many states have, for example, passed an urban employment guarantee programs, right? It's now there in 4 or 5 states, and you can see how they have evolved. Is there anything of that equivalent in the union budget? There's been a demand. In 2019, I was part of someone who wrote that proposal for a national urban employment guarantee program. There's obviously no national program, but no support for any local programs either. So fine, if you say a NREGA type system doesn't work, do we have other types of livelihood or anything centered around improving employment and livelihoods? The allocation of the National Livelihood Mission has come down, as you can see. So the question of responding to the challenge, while it is there in many parts, how does it link with the urban? It's still a question mark. Urban development by whom and who's carrying it out? As some of the discussions already showed, the sort of whole role of ULBs within this sort of mix is not clearly emerging. There's not been any major focus on how ULBs will function or any support for that. I can understand financial allocations that has to come through the SFCs and CFCs. So beyond that, right? So that's one sort of takeover. The other is around possibly a rethink of how we are looking at what I'm calling showpiece urbanism. So smart cities, there's been if you look at the allocations too, there's been a huge, it's almost the overall allocation of the smart cities budget, for example, from 0.25% of the national budget in 2018 to 19 to 0.21% in 22-23, it has come to 0.05% in 24-25. So smart cities is definitely this seems to be, I don't know if there's an admission of the failure of it, or if there's a idea to go beyond it, but is there anything really replacing that sort of thinking is the question, right? You can see, and this is where I'm coming on to the third point, which is about the new directions and the new pathways for urban development with the planning-centered approach. You can see that, for example, this idea of, if you read the report, you'll see that there is 100 industrial parks being thought about with the plug and play sort of system. This seems to go beyond both the smart cities kind of imagination as well as an SEZ kind of imagination. And here you'd see that this has to be done through better, I'm quoting the finance minister here, better usage of town planning schemes. Now, this is a message you see through. When you're speaking about, at a later point, when you're talking about cities as urban growth hubs, actually at an earlier point, they say that for cities growth hubs, economic and transit planning, orderly development of peri-urban areas, again through town planning schemes. And finally, on creative redevelopment of cities, here also, if you look at redevelopment, that is also a classic way of redevelopment is usually through the TPS scheme. And also in transit-oriented development, there seems to be, if you look at TOD policies, otherwise you see elements of this, ideas of redevelopment through town planning schemes emerging. So what is the big takeaway here? The big takeaway for me in this case is that there seems to be, maybe because of the history of town planning schemes and its success in Gujarat, for example, the idea that some of those ideas should be extended to other parts. We have seen that town planning schemes have not really worked outside Gujarat much, in terms of success models. So the challenge is, will this work? How do you promote it? What are the institutional mechanisms to do this? What are other ways to bring all of these things together? All of those remain open questions. But for now, let us just to conclude all the takeaways now, just to keep within time also, just to conclude all the takeaways. There's a clear understanding that there needs to be a response to the challenge that we are seeing in the urban. Hence, say PM Soumyadip has been given money, right? That is for the street vendors. So there's some sort of inclusionary framework there. but not enough directly, supporting unemployment or livelihoods. So there's a big gap there. So the urban development for whom is still an open question. I'm not saying it is given only for the rich or anything like that, but it's still an open question about urban development for whom. That's an open question. There's a clear understanding that we are moving away to some extent from smart cities type of thinking, and the allocation, for example, for Amrut and PMAY, all of them have increased, whereas smart cities is on the decline, right? Extreme decline. So there seems to be an understanding there. And finally, there seems to be a new frame around maybe town planning based and other forms of redevelopment of brownfield, that is being thought about. It's obviously a largely unexplored area. The success of it will definitely depend upon how various actors can come together. So I'll stop here and can take further questions later. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Matthew. It's very interesting to hear your perspective. Yeah, I think it was quite a critical appraisal of the budget. We are also hearing similar perspectives from the TV channels that it's a biased budget, and many areas that needed to be given attention have not been addressed. So your points are well taken. Please remain with us during the discussion round. There could be somebody who would be interested in asking you on the points that you raised and shared with us. I'll just move forward in the program and invite Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, who is also present. He's also a speaker in this program, and to give his views on the budget. Over to you, Dr. Chattopadhyay.
Thank you, Dr. Rumi. So it's nice to hear all the esteemed panelists, and it's very just let me point out a couple of things where some of the things which have already been discussed by other panelists. But for me, like when we are discussing any budget, so we are not expecting any kind of solution or any kind of magic wand to solve some of the pressing problems which our cities have been facing. But the responses to these challenges are going to be extremely crucial. So in that sense, we expect to get an idea about how the future course of our urban policy making, what will be the nature of the urban policy making. And from that perspective, if we just go beyond the different sectoral allocations among the different projects, then there are some of the aspects which are really concerning. And beyond sectoral allocation, just I'd like to point out some of the things based on the experience of some of the already existing urban programs, that we need to think about those sectoral programs in a little bit differently. For example, just my previous speaker, Dr. Matthew, has rightly pointed out, like the kind of urban development that we have been experiencing, or rather the urban development for whom. So if I just trying to take this point a little bit forward, and if I just concentrate on the scheme which has received quite a large allocation in terms of money, the PMAY, because if you see the allocation, then the PMAY is accounting for almost 62% of the total budgetary allocation for the centrally sponsored scheme. So it's a huge allocation. But if you look at the different components of the PMAY, okay, then you will see that again, among the different components, it's the beneficiary-led construction. That component actually got the maximum priority as far as the implementation of the PMAY is concerned. Okay, so that means, so thing is that although in this year, maybe it's on a positive note that the credit-linked subsidy scheme that has been again introduced, and it is expected that it will going to provide some sort of relief for the people who are actually trying to look for some affordable housing, especially in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. But again, there are some concerns because, like if you look at the reports or the survey reports of the different property consultancy firms, then you see that the properties which are of value of less than 50 lakhs, okay, there has been a huge decline in the demand for those houses. Okay, so if that is the case, then definitely to what extent this kind of CLSS credit link subsidy scheme is going to work, I'm not sure. And also another important thing is that as far as we know from our previous experiences, that the amount of subsidy which has been provided under this particular CLSS scheme, so they are also not that much helpful, because in that case, what happens is that the beneficiaries, they have to also depend on some other forms of loans in order to get access to the housing. So, and that is not possible because many of them, they are actually engaged in the informal kind of sector. So it is a huge problematic area. And for another important part, and as far as this budget is concerned, it's not quite clear like what kind of or which vertical of this PMAY is going to be very crucial. So there is no incentive as such is given to them. For example, one is that ISSR, Institute Slum Development, but the contribution or the share of that ISSR is only around like 2.5%. Okay, so that was again a bit of concern, but that could have been much more useful as far as the housing needs of the marginalized sections of the Indian cities are concerned. So this is another important aspect, which is again related to this PMAY, not this PMAY, but relating to the housing, is basically these acknowledgement of the rental housing, because the budget has mentioned about some rental housing program for the industrial workers, and the way it has been stated, I presume that this is mainly being considered as a pilot project, and if it is successful, then it might be scaled up maybe in the next budget. But then again, we have to be a little bit like I have some certain concern about this rental housing as well, because if you know, if you can recollect, we also had a scheme like affordable rental housing complex, which was introduced way back in I think in 2019. But again, if you look at that particular housing scheme and how it actually got unfolded, so that there are many concerns regarding that. For example, there are mainly two components of that ARHC. One is the repurposing of the vacant houses through PPP mode. Another is the construction of the houses to PPP mode. Okay, but again, what we found is that the most of the houses, they are not suitably located. They do not those housing units, they do not have any access to basic services. So those houses, they are not simply livable. Okay, so if that is the case, the situation, if this is the situation, how far this kind of housing schemes are going to be useful, there should be some concern. Second important aspect, again, as many of us was mentioning, and even Dr. Matthew was mentioning, that we are actually moving away from some kind of our fetish with smart cities. Okay, but if you again look at the different sectoral composition, then a kind of metrocentricity or the bias towards the big projects, these are pretty evident, because we are talking about the 100 cities for specific water supplies, solid waste management, and basic service related program. We are talking about creating industrial parks relating to the 100 cities, and also we are like talking about those the hearts, the 100 kinds of hearts, and all these things. So it is not clear like how those cities are going to be selected. Okay, because if we again go by our experience of the smart cities, then the city selection criteria and the way the different city development plan has been conceived, so there was a lot of concern regarding that. It was not at all that much helpful. And another important aspect, which I find quite a little bit confusing, because that this particular budget has specifically emphasized on the bankability of different projects which are related to the basic services. Okay, but this concept of bankability is basically related with the very idea of commercialization of urban infrastructure, and this particular aspect we have been hearing since 1996 Rakesh Mohan Committee report. Okay, and we are talking about this commercialization of urban infrastructure. We are talking about this increasing private public sector participation. We are talking about increasing this budget also mentioned about the importance of market-based mechanism for financing urban infrastructure. Okay, now the basically in the context of Indian cities, the basic problem of or basic constraints for adopting this kind of bankable project is that in the context of Indian cities, we do not follow any kind of revenue model. Okay, because if you again look at the World Bank report, so in many of the cities, in case of water supply sanitation, almost 50% for such project we cannot even we cannot cover the operational maintenance cost. Okay, so if that is the situation, then how can we think of conceiving a project which is going to be bankable and which will be interesting, which will be attractive before the private investors? Okay, and for that, what I think we again need to revisit the very concept of local governance, whether we can be really true and really honest enough in true strengthening of the urban local government, so that they have the decision to make regarding the selection of the project. They have the decision to make to tax the people, and there could be some kind of solid strengthening between the service delivery mechanism and the taxes which they are actually proposing. So these are some of the issues which I think we need to be very much concerned about. Another important aspect is the data problem, which I think Professor Mohalaya Chatterjee mentioned during her speech. So this is very crucial because we are talking about so many problems, but we do not know about the exact magnitude of the problem, because we do not have the latest data. So I think that is also important for us to also understand the specific nature of the data. That is very crucial in order to understand, because unless and until we have some idea about the exact nature of the problem, then how we are going to be sure, like, whether this kind of budgetary allocation that has been proposed in this particular budget are going to be very much effective or not. So that is another area of concern that I want to flag. So thank you so much. So these are some of my thoughts that I wanted to share.
Thank you, Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay. Those were very important, useful thoughts. And I liked particularly your assessment of the provisions in this year's budget and linking those with the experience of what has happened in the past. The example of PMAYU that you gave on the experiences of BLC in the past, the rental housing scheme that was introduced earlier, and the experiences in terms of suitable location of houses and the access to basic amenities. One needs to consider these as everybody is moving forward in terms of transforming the cities is concerned. And you've rightly mentioned, I completely agree with you that a budget is not the solution for all the problems that are being witnessed in urban areas of India. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure listening to you, and looking forward to you documenting some of these ideas for the use of interested readers. I will just invite the final speaker in today's program. My apologies for inviting you at the end of the program, Mr. Samir Unhale, who has been participating in numerous programs organized by Government of India and organized by IMPRI, and sharing his views on various matters related to urban governance in Mumbai or in India in general. So over to you, Mr. Unhale. Looking forward to your views on the budget.
So first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I must also thank IMPRI and you, Rumi sir, and all the participants who have taken time to deliberate on the local bodies and city governments, because for someone who is actually working in it and trying to respond in a academic context as to the day-to-day functioning is a great experience, and thanks a lot for that. So I think the probably a benefit of speaking at last is most of the things have been taken care of. So probably what I would like to share are certain reflections really, rather than any studies. Firstly, I think we need to understand that the constitutional context of urban development in India means urban development is not a union list subject. It's not a concurrent list subject. It's a state list subject. So, despite it being a state list subject, the union government does allocate, I think, substantial amount of funds, which I think the budgetary part is 82,000 crores. And I think if you take into consideration the 15 Finance Commission's yearly allocation is also at the tune of around 22 to 25,000 crores. I'm not exactly recollecting that. But the union in that sense is transferring almost 100,000, more than 100,000 crores, 1 lakh crores to the urban sector. And if you look at the per capita, I think it will come to around 1,800 to 1,900, assuming the urban population is of 50 crores. So first was this peculiar constitutional context, because it's a purely state subject list. Therefore, the only option to the union government is to go through the centrally sponsored schemes. So that's the reason probably we find so many centrally sponsored schemes like Swachh Bharat, like Amrut, like NULM, like Hridaya earlier, Smart City, and PMAY and Swanidhi. So that, in my view, is the reason as to why there need to be so many centrally sponsored schemes. And as we had discussed earlier, that probably we need after 30 years, I think we should seriously consider having another round of constitutional amendment, probably have even some consultative arrangement for that. So, we can take the urban context ahead, because most of the amendments which made provisions are essentially indicative. It is everywhere apart from establishing the institutions like maybe the State Finance Commission, the State Election Commission, maybe the Metropolitan Committee, the District Planning Committee. The entire wording used in the Constitution Amendment Act was the state may. The state may delegate, the state may do that. So essentially, it comes to the political leadership of the state as to how much of that is to be allowed or not. So probably it might be a bit digression, but I do feel that another round of constitutional amendment would help the urban sector. Probably the indicative may could be changed by shall, and probably I do feel that the urban sector will get benefited if the list, I mean, the urban or the city or the municipal part does shift to the concurrent list. I believe it will allow the union to be more actively engaged into the urban issues, which is, in any case, almost 1/3 of the the country's population. And this would allow probably the union to be putting more wherewithal into the into these topics. Secondly, I felt there was a comment on smart city mission. I thought I would just clarify that the smart city mission allocation is going down because the scheme is over. It's not that the allocation went down from 10 to 2 because they wanted to reduce the primacy. In my opinion, the mission got over, and what is left is more of to complete the mission. That could be the reason why you are saying that allocation. Thirdly, I believe regarding very often it talked about the poverty elevation programs, as we said earlier in the urban context. Later, then they went into the employment scheme and then into, as we call it, the urban livelihood mission. So probably the employment generation and the need of labor in cities many times is, at least in bigger cities, it is high. And probably having a labor kind of the rural employment guarantee scheme, creating community asset type of scheme, probably may not always be applicable to all the cities and towns. But I would like to share that from 2016 there is a scheme of urban labor engagement sort of component in Maharashtra from 2016, in which small projects up to 10 to 15 lakhs can be taken, in which the laborers who are registered can be used for the labor component, as was the case earlier. So that I think to share that fact. And I feel that the apart from the numbers, what is also important is the direction, the policy direction that the speech gives. If you go beyond the numbers and look at the ideas, I think probably the ideas I felt were quite different than what they normally are. Like I'm having investment ready industrial parks near 100 cities. So obviously that will definitely benefit. Then rental housing dormitories for industrial places. development of digital public infrastructure for urban governance. And of course, most importantly, I felt was the acceptance that the economic hubs, cities will be the growth hubs, and therefore the economic and the transit-oriented planning and considering the peri-urban areas. So I feel, about beyond the schemes and the numbers, the land use planning instrument probably is getting more strongly recognized as a tool and instrument for urban development. And I feel that as compared to the, at least what little duration I recollect of, this is a more strong emphasis on the use of land use planning as an important tool, just other than just the budgetary allocation. So the creating brownfield, and of course we have discussed most of them. I mean, the esteemed panelists have discussed most of the issues. I believe an element in PMA was that the central government grant or allocation which was made, I think is per beneficiary for BLC is probably might get substantially increased. So earlier it was probably around 1 lakh or 1.5 lakh. That probably would see a substantial jump in the grant which probably the mission allows. So that probably would help the housing element. And I believe the certain, as I say, the budget can't be just looked in numbers. It, of course, it is, yes, it's a major allocation of fund is an important function of budget. But beyond that, the policy directions, I believe, are more impactful rather than just the funds that are allocated. So probably the enabling policies for efficient and transparent rental housing, I felt is a shift towards using the policy instruments more prominently than just financial allocations. And of course, the as it's one important point I found was that the PM Surya Ghar, I mean the solar rooftop scheme, which is up to the almost over 10 million houses are to be covered, and up to 300 units. I think that's a very important part on the current challenges of 2030, 2025 to 2045. If we take these 20 years, I believe the challenges are much different what they were in 1950 to 1970 or 19, even maybe 20 to 2020. The nature of challenges is shifting very rapidly, and probably these elements will have to be acknowledged into the policy statement. And the traditional way of running a public administration, like budgets and allocations and control and audit, these of course will remain. But beyond that, I think the very tenor of governance will have to see a rapid shift into the way government have functioning. And I believe, in my opinion, these shifts I found to be much more prominent in this year's budget speech, and maybe also the budgetary allocations, because there was a talk of Indian carbon market regarding the current challenges like that of climate change and resilience and urban heat. So I found more statements in the speech than the previous one, which I tried to study, which we had probably recollect reading them. Like after the PM Surya Ghar Mufat Bijli solar rooftop scheme, I think there was a specific statement in para 77 of Indian carbon market framework. So I think that's a substantial statement, and I believe once it is recognized, and it will talk of the 2025 to 2045 school 20 years that I think we should focus on. And therefore the shift into the current way of public administration, the current policy options, the instruments that are available needs to be adopted faster. And that precisely I felt this policy statement part of the financial budget was much more stronger use of land use planning instrument than earlier. Then I think first time probably I feel a very strong reference to peri-urban areas was made, which probably was not that to that extent earlier. So I believe the shift from projects to financing it towards greater much deeper use and more fundamental use of policy instruments, of enabling provisions, of the land use, and I found that to be more peculiar or salient feature as compared to earlier speeches were discussed. And then of course most importantly always feel that the cities get funds from all the three levels of government. So if we are just talking that, maybe as I said, the urban sector is getting 100,000 crores or 1 lakh crores, including the the 15th Finance Commission yearly releases which they have. So that I believe will be inaccurate, because the government of Maharashtra in our case, which I recollect, we had the budget just 2 months back, 2 days back. 2 weeks back. So the budgetary allocation of the state of Maharashtra itself is 20,000 crores. Again, there might be some duplication or the reaccounting of the funds that it will be getting at the central share. But the state again has, the state of Maharashtra has 20,000 crores for urban. And then again, all the municipal bodies also have these budgets. So I always feel that when we are discussing financial allocations in urban India, we need to consider all the 3 levels of government. Then again, there are parastatals also which are there. There are other government departments which also have an intersection with the urban context, like the Madhyamik, the education mission, the health mission, and other youth skilling mission. So I believe a more comprehensive view needs to be taken now, rather than just depending upon the allocation of our ministry in a central budget. And probably this could give us a more better picture as to how the public finances are getting utilized, and more realistic and holistic picture. I think it will be very interesting to know, how it does, because again, if you think of Mumbai, I'm sorry, I'm talking a bit Mumbai centric, but if you MMRD has a budget of almost 25,000 crores, CIDCO also has a budget of around 20,000 crores. Of course, it might be a case of a richer mega city that we are seeing, but multiple agencies, multiple ministries, multiple level of government, parastatals, some effort. In fact, in the constitutional amendment also, there is a provision of distinct planning committee or metropolitan planning committee, which is expected to collate all the figures other than the land use plan function. So we need to move further from the traditional, the 1950s era sort of government of budget provision, budget head, towards the challenges of 2025 to 2045, the recent challenges, the current resources that we have, they need to be reflected more strongly. And I felt after reading the budget speech of Honorable FM, I felt that these indications were much more stronger. And of course, our esteemed panelists have discussed about the budgetary numbers in much more detail. So probably these were the limited reflections I felt I had. And I must thank again IMPRI for taking initiative to mainstream cities and local bodies, because such kind of discussion do help to convey the real aspects of city functioning beyond what people read in newspaper or listen on to the news, which is a one-sided, infotainment sort of activity. So thanks a lot for that, IMPRI. And of course, Rumi sir, yourself have been leading urban thinker in India. So it's of course with Tathagat sir and ma'am and Tawarji. So it's great to interact with all of you. Of course, remotely, I think we haven't met even once personally for last 4 to 5 years. We just discussed meeting on webinars. So probably we need to interact in person also now. And thanks a lot for everything. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Onale, for your kind words and for your appreciation and positive remarks on this year's budget, and also expressing some concerns on how the agenda outlined by the Government of India needs to be taken forward, including how better utilization of funds should be done. And these are points well taken, and we'll just begin the proceed forward in the program and begin the session on question and answers and general discussion. So I would like to invite the participants in this program, if they have any questions for any of the speakers, it is the time for you to ask or share some of your views. Very briefly, we have extended our time, but we would like to spend a few minutes, about 7, 8 to 10 minutes on the discussion. If there is anybody who wishes to ask a question or has anything to share, it can be done now.
Yes, Sridharji has asked a question. Sridharji, would you like to ask, speaking yourself? Yes, Sridharji, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening, esteemed panelists. This is Sridhar from XIM University. See, after the budget, I have seen a slew of views being vented by many people about we are paying so much taxes, but nothing happens. We still have to put up with bad roads and bad infrastructure, etc. And everything being tagged to the central government. I think the time has come for people to really start holding the local governing bodies more accountable. How do you see this? Otherwise, our people are, it's like watching a movie, pay for the ticket and then you want to be entertained.
Yeah, good point. People are paying a lot of taxes and they are not getting the services that they deserve, they should get. I would like to ask any of the panelists who might like to take this question in terms of
So I will just
responding.
share from the city government point that the total tax which the citizen pays, what goes to the municipality cannot be more than 1/4%. So the total taxes any citizen pays maybe 0.25%, 0.25% of the total tax collection might be going for the property tax, if at all, at the all India level. So, of course, yes, good taxation paid must lead to good services and good infrastructure. There's no doubt about that. But the association of the taxes paid and the municipality not maintaining needs to be clarified just factually. That not even 0.25 to 0.5% of total tax which the government, all the levels of governments collect, probably reaches the municipal coffer directly. So everything else is to grants and those things. That was point number one. And point number two was that's precisely we said that the constitutional provision of a metropolitan planning committee talks of collating all the budgetary allocations of all the government levels and offices in that metropolitan area, and so also with the district planning committee to give a holistic picture of that area regarding public finance or the public funds which goes to there. So point is well taken, and therefore capacity building and using more and more modern tools and techniques of monitoring, managing will have to be accepted, whether it is smart city or no smart city. I think smart city got a lot of criticism for whatever elitist reasons or whatever. But the rationale behind using current technologies for increasing the productivity and efficiency and delivering better services to citizens will remain there, even if we don't use that word, if that is probably not palatable. But the current referencing on context of the urban system in India and the institutions is very crucial for next 20 years. And of course, innovation and technology are the two major drivers which will have to be focused, of course, upon the traditional government, municipal government or city government we are having for last maybe 50 or 70 years. So thank you.
Great, sir. Thank you. One more small question. Is there any other source of income, or rather, what are the other sources of income for any government other than taxes?
Of course, there are non-tax revenues of different types. Then the earnings from the government undertakings and others. These are non-tax revenues.
Water fees, for example, water charges, that would be non-tax. But in percentage time, that is a small percentage.
At the city level, there is parking fee, advertising revenues, various non-tax revenues are there.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
I suggest Mr. Sridhar to look at a municipal budget, if I'm correct in saying this, that a municipal budget, if you have seen, provides a comprehensive list of heads of income of a urban local body or municipality, where a good classification of taxes and non-taxes is provided. So it's a great learning document. Have a look at it sometime. I would like to invite any other person who wishes to ask a question.
Suresh Babuji, do you want to ask a question? No, so
Yeah, not really, because I was most of the time I was missed the thing, but whatever I that listened, it was a great information and all. And today I'm not asking any question. Thank you for all of you. Thank you.
thank you, Surajji. Tathagata sir, yes. If
Um,
anybody want to ask each other question, yeah.
It is not a question, but actually I just thought of, clarifying one point. There has been a lot of discussion about the smart cities, and Samirji, rightly pointed that out, that the smart cities mission is actually ending. The smart cities mission will come to an end in 2025. Only most of the projects under the smart cities mission are completed in most of the cities. Only few cities, some projects are left, and which are deemed to complete by 2025 March or so. So it is only natural that the allocation for the smart cities mission will go down. But another interesting point here is that um, making a city smart in the true sense of the term, that is, through digitalization, is a long drawn process. It is not possible for one city to become smart in course of 5 years, 7 years or so. And most of the world, the smart cities are city government driven. Whereas in Indian context, it is a national government driven mission. So there is an issue of, a federal relationship coming into question. And this is a point that myself and Chetan sir, we have jointly contributed the smart cities component in the India infrastructure report, where we have also mentioned this point that smart city is a continuous process. And in that sense, the higher allocation for National Urban Digital Mission is an interesting step, because National Urban Digital Mission, although the mission came into being a couple of years back, but there were very little allocation. But this year, the amount of allocation for NUDM has gone up. So that is an interesting thing. But we have to see how that NUDM allocation is actually channelized. So whether it will be there to fund the functioning of the integrated command and control centers, or it goes into digitalization of the government records, and in what way that fund gets channelized, or for capacity building program, that needs to be seen. Also, another point that we have seen in written in our report, that even though many cities have built these 100 command and control centers funded under the Smart Cities mission, but the level of digitalization varies. The level of only 5-6 cities are really at a high level of digitalization, like Pune and Surat and Newtown, Calcutta, and only 5-6 cities are really at a high level of digitalization. But most of the cities are only at a very preliminary level of digitalization. So in that sense, some allocation for the NUDM is a positive thing, but we have to see where it actually goes. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for your insights. Are there any questions more from any of the participants? Dr. Arjun?
Not very related to urban.
Okay. Maybe I would like to, before we close, I would just like to invite all the panel speakers to give a concluding statement as to what their experience was of this program and any other thing that they wish to add. So I will begin with, in the same order, Professor Chetan Vaidya.
Thank you, Dr. Rumi. I think it was a very interesting panel discussion, and a lot of new points have come up, and it is going much beyond the budget. I think which is very positive. One thing is now being recognized that urban as a top priority for the government. As mentioned by Mr. Ubale, urban is not a national or central government subject, it's a state subject. And national government can only provide schemes and financial support, incentive, to some extent, disincentives to promote urban development. Unfortunately, that is where I said that we need to move from projects to policy, and that is something which needs to be focused in years to come. I'll stop at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee, you may like to have some concluding thoughts, remarks.
No, this is a very interesting discussion. Many new points came, and we have to think about that. One of the very important point is that, again, I'm taking that 1 year is a very short-term thing. As Professor Tathagata Chatterjee said, that digitalization is a long-drawn process. It will take time, both horizontally and vertically, to spread over all the urban centers of the country. So we should remember that that urban development is an ongoing thing. Now it is prioritized. It is one of the 9 priorities of the government. We should think that there should be new thoughts coming about for urban development, and not only for I'm repeating at the cost of being very repetitive, but not for just 100 cities, not for just large cities, but all the urban centers of the country.
Thank you, ma'am, for your remarks. I don't know whether Professor Alok is still with us. If not, then I will request Mr. Panwar is also, I think, not with us.
Not sir. He's on YouTube, so we can skip.
Okay. And then Professor Chatterjee, anything you wish to say?
Okay. Thank you. I mean, I think Chetan sir and Mohanna ma'am has already, mentioned 2 very good points. With this, actually, I would borrow a line for what Professor Partho Mukhopadhyay has once wrote an article. So I'll borrow a quote from him that the cities are the engines of growth, all right, but it is an engine without driver. So, although we are focusing on the urban development, on the cities, so we are focusing on the hardware aspect of the cities. But time is long overdue that we start focusing on the software aspect of the cities, and that is the governance reforms. So without which not much can be done. Even the question of, bankable projects, that is obviously very welcome, that we need to have bankable projects, because it is not possible in today's context that the government will raise all the funds. But the question is, if we look at the ability of the cities to run or raise the funds, during Amrut launch, there was this issue of, city, what is that? Ranking of the cities for their credit rating. But only 35 cities qualified to be in the grade A. So out of the country having 4,441 cities, so only 35 cities qualify for the investment grade. So unless that cities are being able to raise their own funds, so many of these problems will persist, and this is again a kind of a chicken and egg situation. Whether you empower the cities first, or you first fund them and the empowerment come later, that needs to be debated. So with this, I stop.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for your remarks. Now, Dr. Matthew Idikula is with us.
Yeah. Thanks.
Would you like to have some concluding thoughts on today's program, or in general?
Yeah, just a minute. I agree that, that obviously, since on the smart cities, since a couple of points came on that, obviously there's the lower allocation is also because the program is on its last bit. But unlike, say, when you saw, whether it was Amrut, there was a 2.0, whether it was Swachh Bharat Mission, you had a 2.0, for PMAY also you have a 2.0. It doesn't look, my sense is the smart city, there's no sort of direction towards a 2.0 coming in. The other, on the digital part of it, if you look at the smart cities mission 2, much of it was on area-based development. The digital and the tech part was a very small portion of the budget, right? So even if the digital continues in the NUDM sort of system, the ABD idea of lighthouse and all of that, my sense is it seems to sort of filter out from the imagination, even of the government at the national level is one point. The other point is something that Professor Chattopadhyay and others have already mentioned. I think it's really important for us to realize that in all of this, within the constitutional scheme that Mr. Samir was also referring to, right? That cities are a bit player, or ULBs are a bit player within that system, and urban development state subject. So if you need any kind of change, you need a reimagination of how cities are governed. This is also a response to the question of how people are saying we're paying so much tax, we get so little in return. That is because of how our tax system is so highly centralized, and then there is a devolution sort of which works, right? So unless you change that narrative, none of these things, all of these problems will continue to exist. None of these things will change. Is there political will to change it? Is there a political will to change the way our governance structure is presently run, right? Our cities are not just engines without drivers. I've mentioned that our cities are like an orchestra. This is my own sort of thing. It's an orchestra without a concert master, but multiple concert masters all driving it in different directions, right? So it's that sort of situation. Do we have ways to change it? Is there political support to change it? I've been part of some efforts here, and I can see in Bangalore the kind of resistance that is there to change the structure. So I think that's the only way in which some of these things can really transform otherwise. Thanks. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Matthew, for your good points. I will now invite Mr. Samir Unhale, if he's with us, to share his views, if he has anything to say.
Yeah, I think this was a very good discussion, a lot of new points. And I believe the discussion also need to happen probably next time on the implementation record of the budget, because every time we discuss the budget allocations, and the implementation of that budget very often gets forgotten in the next new budget when it is submitted. So probably at this time, the revised estimates were probably less by around 12 to 13%. So probably we could also need to discuss on the execution record of the local bodies on both the infrastructure projects as well as the beneficiary projects. So that probably could be done next time. And I believe as I said, the policy directions, I was more impressed by the policy directions rather than just the usual number game which keeps on happening. So I believe the next challenges of 20-25 years are really serious, and we require all the innovation and technology to go for that. And probably the budgets of the various state ministry, various state governments, and probably even municipalities needs to be thought at least once, at an integrated way. And to make this happen, how to make it happen, obviously will be required some institutional innovation. So thanks a lot, Rumi sir, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Unhale. I think it's a good point for you to suggest that there should be some discussion on how funds are utilized once budget documents are released. So I think it's very important to understand that part of the story also. Finally, Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, please feel free to share any idea that you may have in this concluding round.
Thank you. Really, it's an interesting experience for me to listen to all the panelists. And just to add what they have already said, regarding the fund utilization, I think it is very much important to look at how far the whatever money that has been spent, they are actually responsive to the needs and priorities of the local people. And for that, again, we need some kind of governance reforms, as all the other panelists they have been focusing. And the real challenge, I think, is to ensure the people's participation in the urban development plan and programs, make them much more people-centric. So the real challenge, I think, how to make our governance structure, the urban governance structure, more participatory in nature, so that we can aspire for some kind of inclusive cities, if not by 2030, but at least by 2047, the timeline of Viksit Bharat. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor.
Rumi sir, your concluding remarks. I just want one point, because I'm not able to understand. Chetan sir also mentioned the day annual budget, by COVID, it increased a bit. In interim budget, the sanctions were, 0.01 crores. Again,
10 lakhs.
10 lakhs. Again, we have given 300 crores this time, but not before election. So this is something very unusual happening, because government will give before the election, right? Now, time and again, because most of the time there are consultants and they're saying that it will go to CSR. How we are faring with that scheme, it's really puzzling. And Chetan sir also raised. So I wanted all of us to ponder about it. Rumi sir, what do you feel about it?
Yeah, that requires a separate discussion, separate program, but it's a very valid, very important point that you have raised. I don't, we have extended our time. Actually, I wanted to give sufficient time to the speakers to freely and frankly share their thoughts on the budget. We might have overshot the time that we had decided, but I think it was a good discussion. And the important point that emerged from this discussion was, one is the positive point about the center giving priority to the subject. It in itself is very important. And the challenge now is how this priority that has been identified would be unfolded, would be translated into actions onto the ground, what kind of approaches, innovative ideas would be utilized in executing the policies is something that's of concern, because generally the public and the practitioners and the urban community do not see a significant visible change insofar as transformation of urban areas is concerned. So a systematic approach is still needed, step-by-step approach, not jumping steps, but attending to all the aspects that are required if India needs to compete with some of the global cities in the country. Air pollution is an issue, environment is an issue, access to drinking water quality is an issue, proper sanitation is an issue. There are so many issues which do not seem to be going away. There are some so-called lighthouses in the country. Some good examples are there. There's certainly no denying the fact. But a massive transformation is not occurring, is something of worry. People in the country deserve a better quality of life, superior quality of life, as is being received in other cities of the world. There may be certain adversities there, but generally the quality of life is quite good, although the taxes that are derived, generated or collected from the communities is high, much higher than what India is collecting. But people are satisfied with many of the services that are provided. So that's something that still needs to be desired insofar as India is concerned. So I have these simple concluding thoughts that I would like to place before the distinguished panel. And I would like to thank all the panelists for taking out time, participating in IMPRI and other activities as and when they are requested. And I would like to thank IMPRI for organizing this on time, in good time, and over to IMPRI for the vote of thanks and concluding thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Then thank you, everyone. Lakshita, quickly for vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you so much, professors, for such an insightful discussion. So as we have come to the day of today's discussion, I, Lakshita, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies. I would like to thank all of you for attending today's deliberation, a panel discussion on cities, local governance, and union budget 2024-25 as a part of IMPRI's 5th annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of union budget 2024 and 25. We are grateful to our chair for the session, Dr. Rumi Aijaz ji, our esteemed panelists, Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay ji, Professor Chetan Vaidya ji, Professor Vishwanath Alok ji, Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee ji, Professor Tatagata Chatterjee ji, Mr. Sameer Unhale ji, Dr. Matthew Edikola ji, Mr. Tikendra Singh Pawar ji, for taking part in the discussion and enlightening us. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube channel or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a very good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lakshita. Thank you.
Thank you, Rumi sir. Thank you, Chattopadhyay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. to
Thank
all of
you,
Thank you.
IMPRI.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rumi ji. Thank you, Arjun ji.
Thank you. Wonderful
Soumyadip ji.
meeting, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.